So I want to introduce Reverend Penny Macek. And I'm going to read you the facts first, and then I'm going to tell you the truth. Well, the facts are... that didn't come out the way I intended. Oh, well. The truth is bigger than the facts. That's what I meant. Okay, so Reverend Penny Macek has been involved in religious science since 1992, and her career as a minister began in 1999. Same as me. It was a good year, wasn't it? Yeah. She has served as assistant minister, senior minister, and interim minister. And in addition, she has served the international organization in several capacities, including as a lay member of the board of directors, chair of the Golden Works Committee, chair of the co-creation facilitation team. Since integration, she has continued to serve as the lead to the co-creation as a lead co-creation facilitator, and has been involved in training new facilitators. She just completed a 3-year term as the regional support coordinator for Region 6, which includes Arizona, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. She's a lazy person. Prior to ministry, Reverend Penny spent 16 years in the construction industry and understands the value of building a strong foundation. And since stepping away from the pulpit ministry in 2012, she's assisted individuals, groups, and centers in strengthening their foundations. And she's just been here this weekend doing the very same for us. She's described by many as a principle-centered being and a very powerful practitioner. She is known for creating, holding, and facilitating the space in which deep healing takes place. In clear, loving, compassionate, and practical ways, she illustrates the principles of this teaching. And what I want to tell you is, and she has some, there's more unfolding from her constantly. But what I want to tell you is what you're about to experience, and some of you have experienced this weekend, but what you're about to experience is the power and the presence of Spirit moving in and through and as Reverend Penny. And so you are about to feel and know and experience something magnificent. And so I invite you and ask you to please open your minds, open your hearts, open your whole being, so that you might receive what it is that she has to gift to us this morning. Reverend Penny.
Thank you, Susie. I hope I can live up to a part of that. I also want to take a moment to thank Sandy Golke and Liz George for just hosting me this weekend and preparing me and being in conversation with me for the last couple months, and the opportunity to step in. It's really a joy and honor and a privilege to be here. As you heard, I've been here since Thursday facilitating the co-creation process, and I know many of you participated in that on Thursday night with us, and so I thank those of you that were here because that was such an important and valuable part of the process. Actually, Thursday night is the most important piece of the process, and what gets gathered in there is just significant. Co-creation is a consciousness that results from deep healing. And I know as religious scientists we can often say, well, I don't have anything to heal. Really. As Dr. Holmes says, a healing is a revealing. And there's always greater good to reveal. And this morning I want to talk about honoring the mystery by stepping into newness. I said I'm grateful to be here, and I am, because what I've stood witness to is deep discovery. Because this is a time of deep discovery for each of you individually and as a community as you move through this process of transition and transformation. Discover things about yourself, discovering things about the community, discovering who we are in a deeper way. I also want to say I really honor everything that Reverend Duchess has done here, as well as honoring everything that Dr. Carolyn did here. And I think if both of them were standing up here beside me, they would agree with what I'm going to say next, and that is, and there's more. There's more to be done through you because it is you and as you. As good as your God has been, and God has been good to this center, there's more good for you to experience. And so we're being invited to cross into the threshold into a new room in consciousness. That room's been prepared for us, and we've been prepared. We're here by right of consciousness. But crossing that threshold requires a greater realization. One of the ways my teacher, Marcia, used to say she'd say to me, Penny, you just need a bigger God, honey. A bigger God. Because Dr. Holmes tells us that, right? He says we cannot have a revelation greater than our realization. So we're always being called to come back to that greater realization inside of ourselves. All starts in consciousness, begins and ends in consciousness always. I had the great privilege of serving the Center for Spiritual Living in Lake Tahoe for 10 years. And one of the members there and participants, and she's actually a practitioner, is a brilliant musician by the name of Donna Axton. Some of you may be more familiar with her husband, Hoyt Axton. Jeremiah had a bullfrog. But Donna's a brilliant musician in her own right, and several years ago I was attending a concert that she was conducting the local community choir. And they were singing a song that she and the Broadway producer, Chip Morales, had written together called This Most Perfect Day. And just the title of that intrigued me, but as I began to listen to the song, I was just pulled in by the chorus of that song, and I want to share it with you. And I'm not going to sing it because I'm like Kat. I don't want to empty the room. I'll just tell you the chorus. So the chorus is this: the past perfect delights our memory. The future perfect reveals its mystery. In timeless progression, no thought can betray our present perfection in the heart of this most perfect day. And as I listened to it over and over again, I immediately thought about what Dr. Holmes writes about in all of his writing. Perfect right unfoldment always taking place. It's the very first thing I thought about. Now, it's easy to have faith and say that perfect right unfoldment's taking place when I have money in the bank, or my health is good, or I'm in love, or there's a spiritual leader in my community, or I love my job. But take any one or a couple of those things away, and I'm probably singing a very different tune. Much of what I can't repeat from up here. Sounds very different. I'm not likely to belt out that chorus, our present perfection in the heart of this most perfect day. So my question then becomes, so what do we hold on to then when it doesn't look perfect? When my life isn't unfolding from that place of principle that I've been declaring, what is it I hold on to? And for me personally, it's the promises. And all the sacred scriptures have the promises. Thousands and thousands of promises. The Holy Bible has 7,000 promises just by itself. That doesn't count any other tradition. 7,000 things promised to us about life and who we are and how we can live it. And one of my favorite promises, it comes from the book of Jeremiah. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and hope. And so when things aren't going quite like I think they should in my life, I go, oh, I can rest in that idea. God has plans for me. And God has plans for each and every one of you. And God has plans for this community. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you a future and hope. And you know, sometimes we just need to hang out in the hope. But as religious scientists, we can get a little righteous about hope. Don't hope? No. Don't hope? No. I used to do that with people. And I realized I was stealing from them the one thing that they had, was to stand in that hope, in that moment. That that's all they had. Because hope is the beginning stage of building our faith. And we deepen our faith by facing our fears more consciously, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And so co-creation, the process, gives us the tools to face our fears more consciously.
and allows us to open ourselves up in a greater way. It reminds us about the creative process and how we move through it and how we're called. And actually, I would go as far as say how it demands that we live from wisdom. That we live in that experience of wisdom. And wisdom is simply a deep understanding of what is universally and eternally true for all of us. Whereas information is perceived in our head and constitutes shared knowledge, wisdom is of the heart and is about our self-knowledge and what we know and what we discover about ourselves along the journey. There's a deep felt sense knowingness associated with wisdom. The way I always think about it is, I know that I know that I know that I know. Or another way we could say it is, it's the Alpha and the Omega, and always serves as a womb of newness. And so we're always being asked to have greater wisdom about ourselves and about life and how we co-create with life and what we do with life. And for me, wisdom and understanding are two sides of the same coin. And they're essential to our spiritual journey. Most particularly at this time, not only in your community, let's face it, folks, let's look out into the world. A lot more wisdom is being called for. Not knowledge, not our next best ideas, because you know what? Our next best ideas are not going to solve some of the circumstances and conditions we see out in the world. But the wisdom of the one mind of God flowing through us as a clear opening will. Wisdom's talked about a lot in the scriptures. One of the great promises, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. And it's a little confusing because somewhere else it says, lean not on your own understanding. Well, there's a spiritual pickle for you, right? I'm going to get understanding, but I can't lean on my own understanding. But there's a beauty in that. Because it said, then it's indicating that the power of coming into that holy union inside of ourselves, but more importantly, the power of the two or more when we gather together in the two or more. I believe that understanding comes when we're willing to look deeply into our own consciousness. And I also believe that Jesus was one of the greatest wisdom teachers that ever walked. And did you know the tool that he used the most to share and teach that wisdom with? Anybody?
Parables.
That's right, the parables. And did you know that every parable is about you and your mind? Every single parable is about me and my mind. I was thinking about it this morning while I was in the shower, and I thought, I wonder if that was why Dr. Holmes was so influenced by Jesus. Because it was about the mind. And so I want to share one of those parables because it helps take us where I want to go this morning. It's the parable of the sower. And many of you may be familiar with that parable. It comes from the book of Luke. And it says that the sower's out there sowing seeds. Just like you and I, sowing seeds all day long because every thought's a seed. And we're told that some of that seed falls on the wayside and it's devoured by the birds. And then we're told that some of the seed falls on stony ground and because there's no moisture or depth, that as soon as the sun comes up, that seed is burnt and dies as well. And then some of the seed falls on thorny ground. And it takes root, but eventually the thorns choke the life out of that seed. And some of the seed falls on good ground. And the seed that falls on good ground, the parable says that it fruits and it harvests. There's a rich harvest. Some 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. And at the very end, Jesus says, he who has the ears to hear, let him hear. So if every parable is about us in our mind, let's look at the four types of mind that parable is illustrating for us. the Wayside Mind. This is an unresponsive, impenetrable mind. It's closed all the doors and windows and does not let a new idea come in. Dickens called this type of mind dark, dank souls. I remember when I used to hang out there. And I can on occasion now, you know? It's like, it's my way. Don't tell me anything different. This is how I've done it. I don't want to know anything more. And then there's this stony mind, which is a shallow mind. Know a little bit about truth, but there's no embodiment. This is a person that talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk. This is a person that is weak in spiritual practice, the practical application of what they know about. And then there's the thorny mind. Now that mind is rich with possibilities, but it has weeds. It has previous occupants. And they don't like new arrivals very much. I was thinking about this in the shower this morning too, and I thought, wow, most of us just need to have an Occupy movement in our own mind. And then there's the good ground. This is fertile, it's receptive. It's the mind of Christ. It recognizes the principle, the presence, the power, and the authority. And it flows with life. Both Dr. Holmes and Jesus said, as you sow, so shall you reap. And the parable promises a harvest. It says some 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. Heck with 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. So my question this morning is, how big of a harvest are you expecting? How big of a harvest? The percentage of the return is dependent on 4 things. It's dependent on the type of mind. It's dependent on the amount of resistance, the depth of faith, and the power of agreement. So let's quickly look at that together. Type of mind. Obviously, every single type of mind is going to demonstrate. It'll produce, but I can guarantee you this. Only the mind of Christ will give you 100% return. That's the only mind that will give us the fullness of the richness of the bounty of the blessing that's been promised to us. And then there we talk about the amount of resistance. Thomas Trower wrote many years ago, he said, all human suffering is the result of our resistance to change. Wow. So if I'm suffering, it's a new practice I've initiated for myself. If I'm suffering, I stop myself and I say, what change am I resisting? Dr. Holmes talks about change in the Science of Mind textbook. He says, nature will not let us stay in any place too long. She'll let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfoldment and advancement of the soul. This is a wise provision, for should we stay there too long, we would become too set, too rigid, too inflexible. Nature demands a change in order that we may advance, and when the change comes, we should welcome it with a smile on our lip and a song in our heart. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't have a smile on my lips and a song in my heart when there's change coming about. The way my teacher, Dr. Marcia, said it, she says, oh, Penny, oh, honey. She says, there's nothing I've let go of that doesn't have deep claw marks in it. Right? Because we're holding on. We're holding on, we're holding on, thinking that's all the good there is. And think about that with me a moment. Pretty soon this chokes the life out of something. We were meant to be open and receptive and in the flow of what is happening. And then there's that element of faith. There's another parable. It says if we have the faith of a mustard seed is tiny, 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 tiny. And so what I know is if I have a little faith, I have a little love. I have a little abundance. I have a little joy. I have a little health. And so it's about deepening our faith. And you heard me say that we deepen our faith by facing our fears more consciously. It's not to deny that we're afraid, but it's to bring consciousness to that fear, to bring the light and the love that we each are to the fear, so that it can dissolve the fear into the nothingness from whence it came. And then we have the fourth element, the power of our agreement. And I personally believe that we have way more agreement about problems than we do principles. And so I caution you to pay attention to, am I in agreement about problems, or am I in agreement about the principles of life, the principle of wholeness, the principle of freedom, the principle of joy, the principle of peace, the principle of grace? I really believe it's time for us to stop having all the problem prayers that we're praying and root and ground ourselves in the principles in a deeper way and call them out in a deeper way. You know, it's real easy to go into agreement with our friends about conditions. But that doesn't change a condition. We've got to go into agreement about the principles that we want to activate and call forth and see in our life. And so you might be sitting there saying, wow, so what does this parable have to do with co-creation and where we stand? Well, the seed of new minister has been sown. It's been sown. And this morning I'm wondering what type of mind it fell into. Did it fall into that wayside mind, that closed mind? La, 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 don't tell me, don't want to hear about it, don't want to know, don't want to do anything different. Or did it fall into that shallow mind? I left my pulpit back in 2008 for the first time, and as I was in that process with my group, I overheard a group of my people, some of the women in my church, talking, and they said, oh my gosh, we'll never get anybody as good as Reverend Penny. And you know what? I had to call them on their crap. Because that's a shallow mind. That's a shallow mind. And I was facilitating this process recently for another church, and I heard a group of people say, we don't want another minister like we just had. That's a shallow mind as well. And so we start to wow, wake up to, where's my mind? Now, we know, those of us that were here on Thursday night, that seed of new minister in the Chico New Thought Center for Spiritual Living has fallen on some thorny minds, because we did a little process called Fear to Faith. And we identified some things, and so let me just see if any of these thorns resonate with you. The thorn of abandonment, rejection, separation, lack. Judgment was a big one. Uninteresting. Disappointment and conflict. Those are all the thorns in the collective consciousness. But the beautiful thing is we see them now. And now we have the opportunity to reach in and pull them out to create an opening. So that it's the good mind. It's the fertile mind that receives it and allows it and accepts that seed, starts to water it with your prayers, and your consciousness, and your certainty, and your faith, and your knowing. Co-creation, the end result of co-creation is what we call a sacred covenant. And the sacred covenant describes how we want to experience our new minister. Or another way to say it is how we see our relationship with Spirit and our new minister unfolding. And your leadership created a really, really powerful covenant, and I want to share it with you. And I want to stress that that covenant was created from the input that you gave on Thursday night in those other areas as well. And so this is the covenant, New Minister Sacred Covenant for the Chico New Thought Center for Spiritual Living. God has promised, I am that which thou art that which I am. The purpose, my new minister, is the unity that I am, so they're standing on the principle of unity. The vision, I see my new minister empowering compassion, connection, and growth. The universal intentions for my new minister are, and these universal intentions apply to the aspect of preacher, teacher, and healer. To be centered in spirit, grounded in principle. To awaken the wisdom within me through passionate and skillful teaching. To apply spiritual principles through collaborative leadership to meet the needs of the community. And then there are two what we call community intentions, and they were created from the input that you gave us, and the two things that rose to the surface were community outreach and mystical studies. To model and cultivate engagement in community service opportunities, and to teach and facilitate mystical studies, guiding us into a deeper knowingness of the holy union within. This is a really powerful covenant to call your new minister in from. But here's the secret, folks. You can't have this unless you're willing to become it. Unless you're willing to find the minister within you that aligns with this. Like attracts like. And so your leadership is ask all of you to step up and become this. And what I know is the potential of this lives in each and every one of you sitting here this morning and those that haven't come this morning. Because right where you are, the power, the presence, and the authority of God is, and God can do it all. Your God is good, your God is great. Your God can easily demonstrate this for you. I use a daily journal every day. And a couple of weeks ago I was reading in that journal, and this is the statement that I read. It says, sometimes in life you have to have enough faith to make an irrevocable commitment. Enough faith to make an irrevocable commitment. I'm wondering if you have enough faith to be that good mind that the seed falls into. I'm wondering if you have enough faith to be the place in which all of this begins to unfold itself from. If you're willing to be a part of that, if you're willing to participate in that, I would invite you to please stand, and the ushers are going to get into your hands a copy of this in an easy prayer format, and we're going to read it together so that we begin to see the power of that agreement right here this morning as the very activity of this church already unfolding itself. Coming from the sides, I think. You'll see, as we read it, what it really means as I claim it to minister within inside of myself. Everybody have one? How many more? Is there another one somewhere? We need one more up front here. Okay, so we're going to start right at the very top. Sacred Covenant Easy Prayer for the Chico New Thought Center for Spiritual Living, New Minister. There is only one life. This life is good. This life is God. This life is my life now. In knowing that I am one with this life that is God, I therefore know that I am one with all of its blessed expressions, which includes the presence of a new minister for my beloved spiritual community. Because I know that the highest purpose of my new minister is to glorify God, I therefore know that my new minister is a
spirit, grounded in principle. I am awakening to wisdom within me through passionate and skillful teaching. I am applying spiritual principles through collaborative leadership to meet the needs of the community. I am modeling and cultivating engagement in community service opportunities. I am teaching and facilitating mystical studies, guiding us into a deeper knowingness of the holy union within.
As I now accept the highest expression of a new minister into my life, I know that it is revealed in a way that glorifies God and serves the highest and greatest good of all who are touched by their presence. I am grateful God is gracious. Amen.
You may be seated. There's a promise that said, where two or three are gathered together, there am I in the midst of them, and that which they ask, it is done. So by our reading that out loud, we've asked. It's done in mind, but it needs the constant watering of your attention and your awareness. So I invite you to take this with you and make it a part of your personal prayer practice for the next 30 days at least, as a way to continue to support your community, your leadership, that which you desire to experience and express here. And I also ask you to remember to honor the mystery. The past perfect delights our memory. The future perfect reveals its mystery. In timeless progression, no thought can betray our present perfection in the heart of this most perfect day. It's all perfect. Perfect right action is taking place. Perfect right unfoldment is taking place. I know you are well on your way because important and significant work took place these last 3 days. Healing is already washing through, especially for those of you that have already begun your releasing prayer work and laying this down. We could say we're laying it all right here at the altar today. It's done, it's finished, it's complete. God bless you, and so it is.